All right, I think we should be live. Really, really excited to have you all joining this webinar. We have a huge crowd on this webinar today, and we're excited to talking about a very timely topic, which is AI for HR, strategic conversation about efficiency and impact. We also have amazing speakers with us today. I think Kanene is still in the process of joining. She had some technical issues. I think Leticia is resending her the link right now, please. I think she just shared with me that was an issue. And so we'll be waiting for her to join, but I would guide you through a few sort of like thoughts to kick us off with. And I think the first one is we talk about AI a lot as like a tech topic, a tech revolution, right? And at the same time, we shouldn't forget that it's ultimately also a conversation around humans, around change, of how do we actually adopt and take up this technology. And this is something where the people function actually plays a really, really phenomenally important role to actually help us manage this change and actually get this technology to support us in the workplace, not just in the people department, but also beyond. We'll focus quite a bit on the people department, but I would love to actually also like seed that thought in your mind that if you're a people professional, it's actually a really, really important part of like your future role, your future challenges to actually support the entire organization through this time of change, of human change. And just one more administrational note, if you are dialing in from North America and you're part of SHRM, there is a SHRM credit associated with this webinar, and the code will be shared in the follow-up email. And if we sort of like hone in specifically into the HR sort of like domain or the people domain, what we're actually seeing in our latest research report, we ran research serving over 2,500 professionals, both in North America and Europe. And what this latest research actually shows is that over 80% of HR leaders and managers use AI to improve efficiency in their daily tasks. So that's what we want to be talking about. Kind of the question to you, are you maximizing Gen AI potential in your HR processes today? So we'll focus on three sort of topic areas. The first one being the most popular AI applications in HR. Then we're going to speak about how AI can help you source the right data to also get sort of like the business case, the importance of your HR processes and projects and initiatives across to leadership, and ultimately strategies for advocating AI. And I'm really, really excited that I'm joined here by, for now, 2, soon 3 experts. And that is Meredith Haberfeld, founder and CEO of ThinkHuman, who is also a partner for this webinar. So thank you for being an amazing partner in this. Then we'll have Kanene joining hopefully soon once we've got the technical side figured out. And we have Grant Weinberg, who is the VP Talent and Talent Acquisition in HR operations, not AI operations for now, still HR operation that potentially change the future at Eikon Therapeutics. And they will share real-life examples and best practices for leveraging AI to streamline people processes and drive true business impact. So I'd love to ask you, Meredith, to start by quickly introducing yourself. I cannot yet hear you. I'm not sure if you've muted yourself. Yay, there's Kanene. All right. So Meredith, I'm going to actually pass it on and come back to you. More technical issues today. So we're talking about AI, but we're still struggling at times with webinar technology. So Grant, why don't you start for now, and then we'll continue the introductions in the group.
Sure, thank you, Jenny. So my name's Grant Weinberg. I was the former VP of HR Ops and TA at Eikon Therapeutics. Prior to that, Trinet, and before that, a long career at Gilead Sciences, both in Europe and here in the US. I have a real deep fascination for AI, and it stems from the fact that there are things that I know I do very well, and I know there are things that I do very badly. And I look at where AI can help me be better at those areas of growth. And so all of this, you mentioned the human piece, the adoption is huge, right? And so how do we as humans help other humans that are maybe scared of this technology or just don't know where to start with it? And so hopefully today we can at least tick a few of those boxes for the benefit.
All right. And then I would love to pass it maybe on to Meredith. Kanene, I think you might have to log on and off and on again. Really struggling here today with technology, but we're not going to hold us back on a great conversation.
Isn't that perfect for today's topic, figuring it out? All right, you can hear me again. I don't know why I had to log out and back in, but sometimes that's what it takes. So lovely to be back. And because I popped out, can you just repeat the question that you want me to answer?
Just an introduction, like who
are you? Meredith Haberfeld, CEO of ThinkHuman. We're a leadership development company. We work with organizations across many different industries on developing people leaders of all levels. And this topic of AI adoption for me is it's at the heart of, to me, what's at the heart of this conversation is growth mindset, which is one of my greatest loves. And how do we keep people in a space of curiosity, learning, and inspiration around growth? And especially when that growth is going to be happening in the world, whether they're asking for it or not. So that's my context for coming in, and such a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. All right. Well, really excited to have you here. And why don't we start actually with the first poll? So if the team could actually kick that off, our first topic area, as discussed or as introduced, will be AI in HR. So just read the room a bit, because we can't see you. We would love to still hear from you. It's like, how often do you actually use AI at work? And if you open the poll, like that should be kicking up, you can see, like, is it every day, at least once a week, at least once a month, or never? Like, no answers right or wrong, of course. It's more of getting a feeling here. And we see the answers still coming in, but we seem to have a group here that's leaning already towards a lot of AI usage, as actually every day is currently leading with like about 40% of the folks on this call. At least once a week is like about 30%. Never is 16%. I'm glad you're here. So hopefully we can inspire you a bit. And at least once a month is about 15%. So that's changing as the answers are coming in right as we speak. But I think that's giving us a bit of an interesting taste for the folks in the room. And I think it's interesting because when we look at the latest research that we've done, over 80% of HR leaders are actually using AI tools several times a week, and 83% say they're witnessing increased operational efficiency, right? We wanted to speak about adoption, but also efficiency and impact. So that is folks already reporting that they actually get the actual impact in their daily work. And when we also surveyed these 2,500 professionals, there were 4 applications in HR that were leading in the sense of what people said they are using the AI capabilities for. There were performance analysis, turnover prediction, personalized learning, and survey analysis. Or if we widen the aperture, generally all of those fall into sort of 4 kind of traits or categories. That's automating processes. It's getting support in analyzing data. Not all of us fully understand all the data at first sight, so the toolkit, technology, can actually help us to get a better grasp of the data. That leads into the third opportunity, which is helping us to take better decisions, potentially based on this previous data analysis. And it's text generation, right? These are things where the Gen AI capabilities are particularly strong, and they actually occur as tasks regularly in our HR and people processes. So as we look at this data, I would love to go around the room and hear your thoughts on this data presented and how you think this will actually impact your organization in the long run, or the customers' organizations in the long run. So, Grant, you being an operator, I would love to hear your thoughts first.
Yeah, so, I mean, for me, I've seen a lot of impact. Fortunately, I've worked at 2 companies now where they've allowed me to bring in AI, and we've seen the impact of AI. And so just some very quick points. You know, things like job description libraries are a massive undertaking for companies. Well, that's history, right? We built 400 job descriptions linked to a market pricing tool, and that was done in 2 weeks, right? So you've got that you know, just starting at the top of or at the life cycle, you've got the job description. You've got competency and behavioral and skill interviewing questions and training and pointers that you can build out. You can take, policies, right? A lot of policies are written by different people in the legal department, in-house, external. That language is not always inclusive to everybody, right? And so anonymizing the policy and then putting it in and getting feedback on it, those are quick options that really help the organization. And then finally, I certainly have seen the performance management piece. What I do worry a little bit about is, are people's goals and objectives and IDPs reflecting what we want, where we want them to be on the AI curve? Because one thing I learned working very closely with a sales organization is they will focus on the things that generate their money, right? And similarly for employees, if your bonus is connected to these 3 or 4 or 5 goals, that's where you're going to focus. And so any adoption is going to become a hindrance to that. And then I'll just close with one other thought. Are we thinking about designing the jobs where we're allowing if we do the capacity modeling of an employee, do we have enough time for BAU? Do we have enough time for projects? And how much time are we building in for AI development without getting people to 120% capacity? Mm-hmm. And maybe AI is the solution to the 120% capacity, but those are just my high level thoughts.
Yeah, a lot to dive deeper in. Like Meredith, what's your first take?
Firstly, I just want to quickly say hello to everybody in the chat. It's so great to see where everybody is chiming in from. So happy that everybody is here. So please continue the introductions. Love having all this activity in the chat. And although Grant and Jenny and I are having this conversation, we love to hear from you too. So please share in the chat your own answer to this question. It's super interesting for us to have a richer conversation with how you all are currently leveraging AI in your actual workflows and how you're seeing it happen in your functions. So that said, I'm answering use cases at ThinkHuman or use cases we're seeing in our clients. Should I answer both, Jenny?
Well, I mean, I think both is interesting because you have this dual perspective.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. Okay, great. So within ThinkHuman, I would say most team members, we're a small and mighty team, most team members are using AI daily. Thanks to our head of operations, shout out to Shantae, she created an access point that when we talk about adoption, I'll share, but she created kind of a structure for people to start practicing. And I think that really moved people across the organization into usage. So whether they're using it for video editing to much more quickly put together video takeaways or a Zoom summary, or getting something loaded into the YouTube channel, all of those things are now much accelerated with AI technology. Whether it's putting together a summary of learning outcomes from a webinar or a learning experience, using AI tools for that. For some new brainstorm or project initiative, getting a starting point of asking an AI tool to be an expert and give some initial thinking that the group can react to. So a pre-read before a brainstorm. What are other main ways that we are currently using it? And then for a V.1 of an outline for whether it's a document takeaway after a session or something like that. So a lot of text use, I would say. In our clients, oh wait, I forgot a big one, which is in our own organization, which is data synthesis. So 360s are obviously a big part of leadership development, and the kind of heavy lifting of synthesizing that information used to be a very manual task. Of course, it still needs human eyes, but the initial piece together of that has been really accelerated by AI. In our clients, some of what we are seeing is and I'm sure that we'll hear about this in the chat from other people that are doing this, but data synthesis on engagement surveys or culture surveys, hiring and accelerating, kind of making a recruiting team that is small but mighty, really extending their reach. And in performance, like Grant, I've seen it tested, like people are starting to use it, but I haven't heard any of our clients saying like, wow, slam dunk. We really feel like on the performance side of things, this is really working in the way that we want. And I think one of the reasons, to Grant's point, is that we're having to design for today and tomorrow. And how are we setting people up to be managing both of those things? And I think as we talk about adoption, we can get to that.
And I think it's really interesting. And I want to double click on one point, because I think all of the examples you all both mentioned were around automating processes, they were around analyzing data, they were around augmenting decision making, or sort of like the process that leads to like a decision, and sort of like the text generation, testing it for certain biases, augmenting sort of like the generated text. And I think it's this interesting conversation as to, does it create more work or does it actually reduce work for us? And I mean, I think the big potential is it to actually reduce work, or like reduce some of the lower order tasks for us to be actually honing in on where we really want to be spending our time and have the biggest chance for impact. So maybe even to take the performance example, like if I can draw on all my previous notes, the meetings, potentially even like a wider array of data, like it helps me to overcome maybe a recency bias. I'm not starting with this like text field as a manager, but I actually have maybe a first version, but it always needs obviously the manager or the human in the loop to then build upon that. Or if the survey comments that you mentioned, right? I can, if I have an first analysis and a first maybe even draft of an action plan, I can now actually work on actually personalizing that, making sure I spend some more time on the change management. But I think what's so hard for us as humans is to change our habits, right? So how do we make it really, really easy that first step actually becomes helpful? Like we try it once, it might not work. How do we make sure we try it again with a different prompt, with a different tool, to then actually really, it's not like I tried this flavor of ice cream and I didn't like it. It might actually have taste very differently already in the next week with the evolution speed of this technology. So is it more work in the beginning, or like when does that sort of like efficiency impact or efficiency outcome actually kick in? Like, is it the learning hurdle, or like, because I think it leads also nicely into the topic of adoption that we wanted to discuss next. So maybe while you think about it, I think Meredith, thank you so much for reminding me also to call out the chat. If you have questions from the audience, I'm going to try to also incorporate them as we go. So please share them. We want to make this as valuable as possible for all of you. So please type in your questions. I'm going to try to monitor them on the side. But yeah, is AI actually reducing work or creating more work for us right now?
Grant, do you want to take that one first? Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a really great question. And what comes to mind, my thinking is automation is going to reduce the amount of work we do, but AI is going to increase the amount of work we do. What do I mean by that? I've seen tools. There's a company called Presidio that has a people analytics tool. You can just keep querying, right? They built a data lake, they put an LLM around it, and you can mine that data till the cows come home. That's great. But we all know that we have leaders in the business that are, I wonder what the percentage of attrition is within this group. And so we as humans are going to have to put the boundaries in on what is the work that we require to do, and the power of the tools that we have to have a kind of gated fashion, because otherwise I can see people being overrun. And I heard an interesting comment from somebody yesterday who said, let's not kid ourselves. By the time we get to next year and people have implemented AI tools or automated processes, leadership are going to be looking and saying, so which of your team are you now ready to let go of, right? And so that's going to create, you've got a learning curve of AI, you've got a driver of business change, right? That then puts a strain on how do you get everybody up to speed to deliver that value. So I think it's a really tricky situation, right? Reduce on one side, but there's a risk of it increasing it on the other side.
I see in the chat a handful of people said they are already seeing it reduce. I see it like delegation. When you delegate something, it takes more time in the beginning. It's faster just to get the thing done. But once you invest the time in setting up delegation well, then all of a sudden you're like, wow, that was a force multiplier. So is there a cost in the beginning? Sometimes does a new people leader, does a new people manager, are they inclined to just delegate? No, they're like, I just want to get it done faster, do. So it takes something to get over the hump at times to move into, all right, how do I set this up smartly, well, use the tool efficiently rather than have the tool use me? I think of AI, it's maybe overused, but Steve Jobs had a quote way back when about technology that it's like a bicycle for the mind. And I think AI becomes the same thing. Like instead of walking, we now have this bicycle allowing us to do more things, go more places, accelerate. And just the risk for every user is the tool using you or are you using the tool? And do we have bounds around it about what our real intention is, what the goals are, and how it's in service of that?
Thank you so much. And I think it's interesting to also hear the slightly nuanced differences, right? You sort of like Meredith, what I hear from you, it's more of there is an initial hump. It's like delegation. It's actually work to get it work for you. And I think then the ultimate question that we all, I think have top of mind and keep discussing, like, is AI or generative AI more like any technology trend that we've seen beforehand, where it actually ultimately doesn't really reduce workforce, but it's just potentially a driver for additional productivity and impact, because historically technological advantages haven't actually eaten up jobs in the sum. Or is it this time different, and there is a fundamental sort of like difference this time that it's actually eating up in some, not just tasks, but also like entire jobs and families of jobs. And I think
I want to just quickly, if it's okay, Jenny, sorry for interrupting, is that I just want to call out a couple things that are in the chat that I think are just kind of game-changing thoughts, which is that if it's reducing administrative work, because I think a lot of people in the chat said they're using it to do a V.1 of X, whatever X is, an Excel spreadsheet, a synthesis of data, outline for, I think someone said commercial production, but it gives you a V.1, which allows, I think it was, who said this? Lori said, it allows you to move to the strategic work rather than getting bogged down in the administrative. So in the end, are you doing more or less work? Maybe you're not doing more or less work. Maybe you're doing the same amount of work, but it tips the scales about where humans are putting their work and moving it out of the administrative and into the strategic, which I think for people and organizations is probably really exciting.
Yeah, exactly. And in the end, like a job is a family of maybe more sort of mundane, automatable tasks, strategic tasks, empathy, which is something that's still deeply human at this stage. But I think it leads to an interesting conversation. And I would actually love, I think it's a really good point in time to maybe actually enter our second poll to kind of like get everyone's feelings in this room. Like, are you concerned that AI will replace not just some of your tasks, but actually your role? So there's 3 options. Yes, I'm concerned, somewhat concerned, not at all. So I think it's interesting, like maybe to also not just hear from the 3 of us, but to actually hear what everybody's thinking around here. So let's give folks, you're amazingly fast at responding, at least parts of you are, so let's keep them coming. So interestingly, we have almost 60% saying they're not at all concerned. We have just shy of 40% saying they're somewhat concerned, and only 2% saying, yes, I'm concerned. And again, like there's a lot of votes coming in, so please keep monitoring if you're interested on the full picture. And I think it's interesting because when we look at the survey data, and we also like asked individual contributors as to like what skills they want to learn, AI is actually the top skill that individual contributors want to learn or improve on. So there's huge curiosity around leveraging AI, using AI, which makes sense because this might be the one next skill we all really need to learn to future-proof ourselves. And at the same time, and I think this number and data is slightly different from what we heard in the room earlier. Only 42% are utilizing AI weekly or daily. And if we look back at our survey data, we actually had about 80% of managers say they use it weekly or daily, but only 40% of individual contributors. There's a bit of a difference in adoption between these two sort of like constituencies and groups and companies. And some of this might be linked to fear, not having clarity as to what I can use it for, how I can use it for, maybe unclarity on the policies within the company, or even just maybe also to a certain element fear of one's job. So if we look at the data from the report, actually 46% of ICs have actually said in our research that they're fearing AI could significantly replace their roles, or at least shares of their roles. So maybe we have a high share of early adopters and managers in this call today. But this might not be representative, as the sample set of this research was much bigger, and I think there's also other reports finding very similar trends. So how do we address this disconnect between the desire to learn and at the same time the actual utilization? And what strategies have you seen that actually prove to be successful in generating the right kind of AI engagement among employees to grow?
Grant, do you want to jump in first, or shall I?
Hey, you go first, Meredith,
Okay.
this time.
I did a little shout out before to our head of operations at ThinkHuman, because she did something that I think was, as I said, real shift, like paradigm shift for the organization. And that was, we used an all hands meeting as a hackathon. There was prep, and then there was the hackathon itself, and then there was follow on. So in the hackathon, people were put into small groups. Before we went into the small groups, everybody was on an all-company Zoom where we talked openly, whether people wanted to talk out loud or in the chat, about their thoughts about, what are the tools out there for AI that people are already using, what's working, what's not, just to kind of like get the juices flowing and have it not be a talk but a dialogue where the group gets to kind of crowdsource their own thinking and peer share. Why is it important, and let them crowdsource that. What's the impact of not adopting? Again, getting them to crowdsource. So working through some of those considerations of why is it important and what's the impact of not doing it, but instead of it being a tell, letting the group kind of generate that and then talk in small groups amongst themselves. And then after that first part, we all got online and did a few sample queries and tests, and then went into small groups with a challenge. So everybody was in breakout rooms with some kind of AI challenge, spent, I can't remember, 20 minutes or something in there, and then had a spokesperson who all the spokespeople from each of the groups came out and did a share out of what they learned and what insights they had as a group. And as a first step, what in our view that helped to do was bring down certain barriers, open the dialogue, and most importantly, get people in a mode of curiosity. So out of their kind of mental habit trails or concerns and thinking about it and into action. So that was our first step and proved to be really useful. And I'll talk in a moment about things that we did afterwards. But over to you, Grant.
Thank you, Meredith. So I'm going to give you a real operator's response to this one. So at a previous company, I implemented the first intelligent talent platform, Eightfold. And we had an old ATS, which meant that the data mapping took longer and we had a lot of extra work to do. So I was frustrated that it was taking so long to implement the tool. What I had was, it ended up being about 8 months before we went live. And so as soon as the delay kicked in, I said to the TA enablement lead, let's start a program of educating the business on what is AI, what is machine learning, how does that fit into talent acquisition, and then each month we took them on this journey. By the time we launched the product, the adoption was already there. People knew what AI was, they knew what the tool was, they had seen some of the demos, the videos that we had posted, and so when we went live, we had managers asking, hey, when do I get to play live in the system with you? And so, I reflect on that because the next company I went to, I just took that momentum and went, everybody loves AI and, it's going to be adopted, whatever I do. Sad thing is I struggled in the first few months at that company because the team weren't bought in. And the first example was everybody was bought in. The business, broader HR, and the talent acquisition team fully bought in. So I think as we think, how do we leverage AI? That is definitely one of, don't assume that everybody in the business is on the same maturity curve. And actually, how many companies are stopping to assess AI readiness across their workforce? No, I haven't heard of one company that's put a survey out to specifically address that, to understand who are our early adopters and who are those that we need to support in the organization.
I think that's a really interesting example. So thank you for sharing it. So if you take these two experiences and would almost like translate them into like a step-by-step playbook for the audience, like what's the steps and the order of steps you need to get right to set yourself up for success, for that successful rollout of an AI tool or AI functionalities in one of your existing tools, just getting people to use LLMs more, whatever your approach is, but like what's the right way to actually drive impact?
So I think it starts with a statement at the top: don't expect what you haven't inspected, right? And so when you take that saying and you break it down, step one is, what are you trying to automate or introduce AI to, right? What is the change management plan for getting people, taking people on that journey? Considering, don't wait until you're signing contracts, do it right at the beginning. And I know we find some projects get convoluted with the amount of stakeholders. I think this is a really important, if I'm putting an AI tool into HR operations, that's touching all of my people. And so I need to address that learning for all of them. And then communication. right? We over communicated in the first example. And so it drew people in. It was consistent. It was like LinkedIn posting, right? And so we got the momentum through there. And then there's definitely the feedback loop of checking at each stage the readiness of the people and not being scared to delay the project to allow people to catch up. I think a lot of the times we drive the project to the delivery date because that's what we get measured on. And then we leave behind victims, right, who just weren't able to adapt as quickly. So I know that maybe wasn't the best checklist, but I think top of it is don't expect what you haven't inspected. Make sure that you do good change management. Map your stakeholders, do change management, strong communication, and then the feedback loops to address where the gaps are.
Amazing. And I'm so happy that we have Kanene here, who's amazing. Hey! All happy that you get the chance to hear her perspective as well. Maybe just one sentence intro, Kanene, from you on yourself, so the audience gets to know you, and then I'm also going to direct the first question straight at you.
Okay, great. Okay, wonderful. I'm sure that there were gems dropped, so I'll catch up and also reiterate some things probably. Who knows? So I'm Kanene holder. I started off in education. I have a degree in a bachelor's of science in speech pathology, which actually helped me really understand really quickly large language models because it's a map of the brain, and that's what I had to do to understand speech communication disorders, right? And so large language models, what you're looking at is literally how the brain acquires language. And so that's why I'm so thrilled. I've also, my claim to fame, as well as being an off-Broadway performer, is that I've been in very toxic workplaces. And so I have a very intimate and intuitive knowledge as to what's wrong, why it's wrong, and how we can fix it, and also guiding people on best practices regarding artificial intelligence in ways that actually bring joy, ease, efficiency, clarity, and a sense of zen. Mm-hmm. Why not?
Amazing. And Kanene and I were at a conference on AI at Tuesday and had an amazing lunch discussion. So I'm going to pick it off at that point, because I think it comes nicely as to Grant spoke about sort of the steps around what makes initiatives successful. How do we drive adoption? How do we set ourselves up for success from a change management perspective? And as we all I think we also discussed there and on the prep of this webinar, it's a human revolution and transformation as well. So inspiring, leading, managing through the human side of the AI sort of revolution and change is one of the biggest challenge for some of the current generation of leaders. So what advice would you actually give executives or managers who are thinking about driving adoption and reducing fear in their organization? What traits do you need to bring, and how do you actually approach this from a human change perspective?
Yeah, excellent. Really thrilled to dive right in. So the tech has already disrupted. The tech has already changed what is possible with tech. Are you in simpatico? Are you a mirror to that level of to that level of disruption? And if the answer is no, then the tech is going to do, and the tech is also going to detect the degree to which you are not willing to change and be transformational. That's what I think is happening. Is that fortunately for I hope most people, there will be a parallel universe where we will be as willing to change as the tech is also rapidly innovating. We have to innovate at the same pace as innovation. And those who don't, it will be seen quite quickly. I think it's extremely exciting, artificial intelligence, in terms of our ability to critically think and massively scale and display that critical thinking in ways that we've never been able to before. So I think that in terms of the rising parabola of fear, I think that will rapidly decrease as people actually see the ability to be way more impactful and way more resonant with a much larger audience, a much larger customer base. Whatever your use case is for AI, when you see how much more you are effective, people are going to be able to say, wait a minute, this thing that I feared it's actually the thing that's going to unlock my capabilities to connect with people on a massive scale. It's actually going to improve the way not only I work, but the way I also relax, right? Because that fear of I'm not able to do this can be taken care of if you're effectively implementing AI. And so the question becomes, who are you? What do you currently perceive your job role to be? What can you then say, okay, what do I receive joy from in my job? And I don't want AI to do that. Well, you still do that. What do I dread in my job? Let me learn how AI can collaborate with me to take that off my list of things to do so that I'm actually able to free up my time. But the question then becomes, do we perceive the amount of time that we're going to invest to learn how to leverage AI as a cost to how I've always been used to doing things? And I think that that's really the change management people need to think about, is the fear of losing out on time versus I can just do it myself right now. And at a certain point, you have to pause and say, I am going to be able to maximize my impact so much more if I invest this time right now to maximize leveraging and learning AI. And I think that is the continuum that people are going to be shifting through in 2025, which I thought people were going to do in 2024, but no. I think people are still scared, and I think that people are still not having transparent conversations about how they're using AI right now, if they are, how they're going to be evaluated moving forward, knowing that you're also using AI to do your job. I think these are transparent conversations that people need to have, and I think people need to play. I think people need to view AI as also having fun. So use it in personal ways so that when you're using it in professional ways, the learning curve is not steep, because you're like, you know what? I already did this to help me find my outfit or to remix how I cook my leftovers. Now I can have it do my spreadsheet.
I think that would be an interesting webinar, like that we should do at some point, like the personal use cases to actually leverage AI for. I think that would be a fun one. Meredith, just quickly to double click on that, because you work with a lot of organizations on good leadership, good communication, like good change management. Like, what's your take? Like, what are the skills? What's the playbook that really ultimately helps us to get the adoption up?
I put into the chat the 5 C's for AI. So clarity, collaboration, consistency, culture, and celebration. Those 5 C's are really fundamentally actually for any kind of change management, they apply, but starting with what are our real objectives here? What does success look like? Then to Kanene's point, get people playing, like move down the obstacles of the how, and I'm not sure, and it's not right, but create those opportunities for play and collaboration. In the domain of consistency, I had mentioned before we did this hackathon at ThinkHuman, but a hackathon alone wasn't enough. We needed afterwards to say, okay, what is the follow-on to get people working in small groups with peer accountability, with a goal, with a reward at the end, and then bringing people back together after they did their projects of what are we had people working in small functional groups to say inside our function, what's a list of ways that AI could accelerate a workflow? And I'll come back to workflows because I think workflows are a really important way to think about adoption. So what are different ways that AI could accelerate a workflow? Let's take one. Let's create a V.1 use, start using it, and then we had awards for who did. So that's in the consistency, and then starting to build that into the culture. So from the culture standpoint, people are using it, again, like Kanene said, in their own individual ways. So they're kind of like applying here, I can accelerate this, I can get this V.1 done faster. But until it is talked about as part of designed workflows with the expectation that it is a component of workflows, it's not embedded in the culture. It's not embedded in the SOPs. It's not embedded in cross-functional interaction around that AI tool. So in my view, the way you get something embedded in the culture is, for the most part, you need a process or a structure or a mechanism that's going to move it from behavior, even those people that have habits around it, and start to institutionalize it across the organization. So whether that's a company-wide OKR, I mean, if you think back to a decade ago, people were putting OKRs or KPIs in place around a digital transformation. If you don't have some kind of North Star as an organization to get this embedded in your culture, it's just going to be very haphazard. And then the last part of those 5 C's, celebration, which if you're not giving people the opportunity of like, shout out for how you applied that, that's amazing, it's not that motivating. People are motivated by, the sticks and the carrots. And if you give people carrots for this, they're going to spend a little extra time on it.
Awesome. And maybe just to double click on the consistency part. And I did promise folks I'm going to go get to questions in the chat. And I think there has been a big upvoted questions on what AI tools should HR be using? And I think this links a lot to the consistency part, right? Because in the end, like, we do not want to use AI for the sake of using AI. We want to leverage AI to get certain tasks done. To Kanene's point, like, what is the stuff in my role that I don't enjoy doing, or where I think there is an opportunity to do it faster, to automate it, to analyze the data faster, to augment me taking decisions, or to help me write text, like being the archetypes. So what's the right sort of like way to help folks? And we are bad at changing habits as humans, to start actually doing more of that through our daily work? Is it like, do I go back directly to the large language models, like, so I'll use Claude or ChatGPT, or do I need to look at my application layer, like Leapsome, for example? That's an application layer with an AI powered people tool that focuses on a lot of things from performance engagement, learning, onboarding, and wider processes. That's an application layer where you can have AI. You can also have very specific, like, vertical AI tools. What are the pros and cons, and what's kind of like your take on how you can actually help companies drive consistency and help employees change habits? Grant, maybe the operator perspective to start with, in the weeds.
Sure. So I think for me, there's a few things. One, are companies updating their values to reflect the desire to transform to this automated world, right? Because once you put that into the values, that starts to get built into the goals and objectives. People have clarity around what their expectation is. So I think that's a big piece for companies to do. The next one is ensuring you give permission to fail. And so it was really interesting. I was on a webinar earlier this week, and the example they gave of where employees put company confidential information into ChatGPT was Samsung, right? I've not heard of another example since the Samsung one. So either people are becoming more tolerant of data, sensitive data being in there and, restricting that, or there'll be some reaction to that. But I think we need to be very careful that the confidentiality and the risks and things like that. So permission to fail is really important, because when people feel they have the permission to fail, that's when they learn the best, right? Because they're not worried about the next step they take. And then you made a great point. You used the term AI powered. I think from an operator's perspective, what I've certainly done is I've looked at who are the AI native products or services or tools, and who are the AI powered. And for me, the difference between those two is AI native, it was built on a large language model with a data lake, right? Straight out the gate. I think the AI powered, there's nothing wrong with it, but there's a lot of players that were before the AI revolution that are now claiming to be AI companies, right? And I think it's okay to do that, but we should really get this definition between AI native and AI powered companies.
Kanene, do you want to jump in? I think you're muted, actually.
Thank you so much for that, Grant. Yes, I had a conversation. I'm a part of a, how do you say this? A social impact membership organization called NationsWell, has lots of partnerships with major Fortune 1000 companies. And I had a discussion around what is a tech company. And one person said that Uber was a transportation company. I was like, it's a tech company, right? And so someone else who works at Bank of America said that their CEO had just announced that Bank of America is now a tech company. So this conversation about tech native companies and tech adjacent or tech leveraging companies is something that people need to be quite aware of, because the worker then perceives themselves as, okay, I'm no longer a worker. I am a master of technology to assist me in over overreaching my goals, right, in my job role. That's, I think it's a perception shift as to what it is to be a human being or a human and a worker in the 21st century in a generative AI world, right? Am I a human being? Mm-mm. I'm a human being that maximizes my full mind, body, and soul potential because I'm leveraging the thousands of years of information that has been scraped off the internet and everything in between in AI. That's how I walk around in the world. I walk around as Imhotep and Plato and Aristotle and Fannie Lou Hamer. You have that in your fingertips within 1 second. And so when you frame it that way, to workers, and you say, you know what, you are no longer you. You are the sum total of your ability to leverage this infinite thing called generative AI to co-collaborate with you, to inspire you, to provoke you, to push beyond the limits of what you thought was possible. And if you as a leader take on that role of a motivational tech enabler, right? Think how then people clock in the next day and it's a totally different workplace that you're now presiding over. And I think that that's the type of digital transformation and unlocking and unleashing human potential and capacity that I think is the way to really go about it versus, okay, compliance, okay, and it's that if we approach tomorrow as we do today, that it's just not going to work. Again, let's look at climate change, right? We can't just walk around with umbrella anymore. We need an umbrella. There's forest fires in Prospect Park in Brooklyn. Like, an umbrella is no longer enough to keep us safe from the weather. And I think we need to think about tech in the same way, and the fact that there's a myriad of different ways that people are able to show up, and there's untapped potential of who that worker is. And I would start by asking the worker, who are you? Who are you outside of this job? What are your passions? What are your goals? What are your visions? And you never know how, by asking that question and then pairing that with generative AI, there's so many more things that you can unpack and unload the potential of the workers that you have. But by framing it that way, in terms of generative AI is unlimited, I'm limited in the scope of who I know you are. I want you to think about who you are. And then I want you to think about who you can be with AI. And I want you to think about that personally, and I want you to bring that in professionally. That to me is the vulnerable. That's why I said vulnerable, humble, and playful. That's how leaders need to be, and that's how everybody needs to be. Vulnerable. You know what? I don't know what I don't know, but I know that generative AI can probably point me in the right direction. Even if it's the most crazy idea, I don't even know how it's going to work out. Pair it with generative AI and see what comes up. It might not come up today. It might come in a year, but thinking that way. Lean into what I don't know that I don't know.
Yeah. And maybe just to double click and sort of like make this point also like further or expand this point further for the audience, I think it's interesting in the sense that we have an ecosystem of evolving AI technology, and I think there's a lot of AI powered tools, AI native tools. I think some of the AI powered and AI native tools are actually using the same language models under the hood. So I would actually challenge if that always makes such a big difference, but that's a conversation we can further expand on. But then in the end, it's all back to the question of what's the job you want to get done, right? What's the outcome you want to drive? Like, what actually moves the needle. And I think we also see a massive learning curve or a sort of improvement curve in this technology, right? So just because you try something now, like you ask ChatGPT to write, I don't know, like a message to help you with X, Y, Z, and it doesn't do it particularly well, doesn't mean like the next time you try, it won't be like significantly better. So we always need to like keep trying, keep learning, take this very sort of like failing and learning approach, which I think is something that we're not necessarily always used to. We try it once, and then we rely on that sort of like knowledge. Meredith, maybe like a quick last take on that from your side, and maybe with the specific twist of can the future of AI make work actually more human-centric? What do you think is possible? And then I think we need to wrap it up.
Can AI make it more human-centric? I think that the jury is still out, but the possibility is absolutely there. One of my favorite AI use cases is when somebody is struggling with a very human issue, like a conflict with another person or navigating someone's upset, putting that information into AI. A year ago, if you told me AI was going to be able to bring an empathetic approach, I wouldn't have believed it. And now I'm seeing such amazing, rich, deep responses coming from AI about how to navigate those things. So is it already in a certain way elevating the human experience and allowing us to be more empathetic and connected and to bring a better version of ourselves? I think yes. Why I say the jury is still out is because without real intentionality, this can go a lot of different directions. So humans have a role to play in putting the guardrails and goals around this endeavor.
Awesome. All right. I'll give you all time to think of your sort of like 1 minute summary of all what we've discussed. And while you have the time to think about it, just want to point out to the audience, first of all, thank you so much for joining us. And we have another webinar coming on December 12th, slightly different focus, but at least one partner is the same, as we're also doing that one with ThinkHuman. And it's the topic is on how to drive high performance in remote teams. So unlocking productivity and collaboration in distributed teams. We'll also share some more information on ThinkHuman as well as Leapsome. But I think that's like another great opportunity to have a slightly different conversation, but that's obviously also very important for driving both efficiency and impact in today's world of work. And with that, maybe Grant, as you always wear the operator lens, like what's your short summary of the key takeaways for the audience from our discussion today?
So thank you. And thank you to all those that have sat through today's webinar. For me, I look at it as I was around when the calculator was introduced at school, right? And there was major uproar and people were going to become dumb and nobody would be able to do arithmetic, right? But the human is still there using, whether it's the calculator at school or the handheld calculator being your device at home. And so I think humans absolutely have a place to play. At the end of the day, we should see this as an extension of people and augmenting people versus replacing people. And I have a real passion around changing that narrative of, the bots are coming to take your jobs. They're not coming to take your jobs. But the human that learns how to use them effectively is absolutely coming to take your job. That's a guarantee. And so, again, the communication around how does the company feel about AI, and then building your plan rather than letting it organically grow. I think companies have to now sit up and be responsible and take that responsibility on of, what are we going to implement it and how are we going to do it? And some of it might be uncomfortable for the company because the employees will be driving harder. And that's the negotiation of, where we're both comfortable and then grow from there.
Awesome. Kanene, what's your take?
Yeah, and thank you so much to Meredith and Grant, and obviously you too, Jenny. So I just wanted to share my graces since I guess at the end instead of the beginning. But yes, so I'm really excited. I'm launching Empowered, which is an alternative, a more inclusive alternative to the writ large chatbots from ChatGPT to Claude. So it's specifically programmed for nuances around everything that has anything to do with inclusion, right? And so it can generate answers and also be, as Meredith said, extremely empathetic as well. So I put the link in there around using that tool. We're very excited to launch. We already have partnerships with major corporations like MasterCard. And so we're now doing a B2C version of that so that more workers, wink, wink, can also have access to our tool without having to go through their workplace. Regarding AI and my takeaways are to be courageous.
That's really
And I
strong.
think people like to hide, they like to mask, they like to play the game of acting as if, but the truth will be seen, because there are going to be some people that are literally going to be transformational beings unlike we've never seen before, because they're leveraging AI, and that's because they themselves are also willing to be transformational, right? And that takes courage. And I think the more that each one of us is being courageous and authentic in our and curious in our ways of thinking about who we are, then as humanity, as a sum total of who we are, also untap that level of authenticity and courageousness, we can then transform the world and not be mired and plagued by all the issues that we are mired and plagued with now. I think it's bigger than work, but it is work, right? I think the work is on ourselves to really get intentional. Who am I? What do I want to achieve? And the clearer you are about that, that's called a prompt.
Awesome.
When I prompted yesterday, last thing I'll say, NVIDIA and Getty Images partnered up yesterday with Female Quotient at a huge AI conference about women in AI. And you can go up to this little kiosk and you can put in a prompt and it'll print off the photo of your prompts. And I'm just like, and they were blown. This is at NVIDIA, right? Like big time in NVIDIA. They were like, who are you? They were like blown away because I literally typed in, I was so detailed, and you could literally see the photo that was generated from my prompt versus everybody else's. You yourself had to be as clear as possible and get intentional. The more clear you are, the bigger the input, the bigger the output. The input is you, and the output is also you. The question is, who are you, and how in touch are you with the infinity of your potentiality?
That's amazing. Thanks for sharing that prompt on courage and being such a powerful prompter. And Meredith, your final take, and what's the takeaway for the audience from this conversation? I think.
I will go quick because I think that people are jumping for their next meetings, but I'll just quickly say, on the heels of Kanene's courage mindset. So mindset, milestones, and measure. You start with courage or whatever mindset like really inspires you into action and frees you up. Set some goals, have those milestones, and then check back. What am I doing? I mean, that's how we change anything, whether it's getting ourselves to the gym or, moving toward buying a house. You start with the mindset, you set some goals, and then you start evaluating, am I getting there or not? So that's my takeaway.
Amazing. Thank you all so much. And thank you everyone for joining and being so active in the chat and submitting questions. And I think the one takeaway I'm taking from today, I think it's just such an important point we shouldn't forget, is also like the play and enjoying the ride and the learning and the failing. So thank you for a fun and playful conversation today. Really enjoyed it. Thank you all for joining. And I hope you have a lovely rest of your day and see you all again very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you all.